Good morning, everyone from Canada. It is Wednesday, 8 o'clock a.m., and I am here live on my YouTube channel for this English lesson. Just want to say welcome if you're new here. My name is Jacob from jacobteacher.com. I'm live on this channel every Wednesday. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if this is the first video of mine that you're watching. I would love to have you as a subscriber. And let's have a great lesson together. I'm really excited about this lesson. I'm going to be speaking about a song that I really love and that I think you'll love too. The song is called Richard Cory by Simon and Garfunkel. It's a fantastic song for learning English. Simon and Garfunkel, they originally wrote this song about a poem that was published in 1897 by a man named Edwin Arlington Robinson. So he gets original credit for the poem, for the idea, but they turned it into a lovely song, and we're going to look at this song today. So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to read through the song verse by verse, and I'm going to ask you guys questions after each verse, okay? So we're going to spend some time discussing what the song means. You're also going to learn some new vocabulary from the song. I'm going to teach you some new phrases that you can use. It should be a fantastic lesson. Let's get started. Richard Cory by Simon and Garfunkel. And also, if you're watching the replay or if you're here live and you haven't listened to the song yet, you can do that by following the link in the description of this video. It's always nice if you can hear the song and think about it first before analyzing it with a group of people. So I'd recommend doing that for the best possible experience. But here we go. So this is the first verse of the song. They say that Richard Cory owns one half of this whole town, with political connections to spread his wealth around. Born into society, a banker's only child, he had everything a man could want: power, grace, and style. It's the first verse. Now, my first question for you today is, who is Richard Cory? If you read this first verse here, if you read this paragraph and you think about everything that's being said about Richard Cory, how would you describe him in your own words? Let me know in the comment section right now, and I will take a look at who is here and say hello to everyone. Let's see, Alejandra is here, Augustin is here, Christine, hello Christine, nice to see you again too. Hania Nigar, Patricia Shazia, Miss Danila. It's midnight here in South Korea. Well, good evening to you, Miss Danila. That's a hard name to pronounce for me. Yin Yin Hite from Myanmar. Precious Madel Santos. Hello, mods. Grace. Miss Danila Shazia. That's awesome. So let me know, you guys. What do you think? What is Richard Cory like? Who is Richard Cory? Let me know in the comment section. Huang Vu says, a powerful, graceful, and stylish man. Okay, powerful. He's a businessman, says Christine. Sure. He's someone who is successful. Hania says, a banker's only child. Right? If you're an only child, it means that you don't have any siblings. So he's the son of a banker, the son of someone who's very wealthy and rich. He was born into society. Very good. He had everything a man could have. He's a rich man, says Precious Madel Santos. Exactly. Perfect. So he has everything a man could want. Now that's exactly what I wrote down too, right here, okay? Who is Richard Cory? Well, Richard Cory, he seems to be very wealthy, you could say, right? He's a banker's only child. He's popular. He knows important people. This line, with political connections. So if you have connections, it means that you know important people. It seems like he has important people who can help him, who can do him favors to spread his wealth around. So he's very popular. He's wealthy. And as Mad says, he has everything a man could want: power, grace, and style. If you can hear that noise in the background, I think my mom just decided to take a shower at this moment. One day I will have my own studio and it will be perfectly quiet. But anyways, let's keep going. Now, one thing that we should notice here is who's telling this story. That's one thing we should think about. It's not Richard Cory. It's someone else talking about Richard Cory. But I work in his factory, and I curse the life I'm living, and I curse my poverty. And I wish that I could be, oh, I wish that I could be, oh, I wish that I could be Richard Cory. So my next question then, who is the narrator and how would you describe the narrator? Let's assume it's a man for the sake of this lesson. So who is the narrator? What is he like? Try to use some different adjectives to describe him, and I'll teach you some new ones here in a moment. Christine says, maybe he is a politician. We don't really know, I think, but it says that he has political connections. It suggests to me, and he's a factory owner too. So I don't think he's a politician, but politicians perhaps are very wealthy, some of them, and have important connections, so it's a good guess. Grace says, a son born with a golden spoon. Yes, he was born into wealth. He was born into privilege. Yin Yin Hate says, Richard Cory is the banker's only son and he had everything. Absolutely. Shazia said, Richard Cory was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Owner of rich property, political influences. Exactly. So he was born into privilege. Okay. Grace says his assistant. It doesn't seem like his assistant. It seems like an employee at his factory. Memo Don is right. A poor guy. Good. He seems poor. He says he curses the poverty that he lives in. The author is a guy, worker in the factory. One great point that you make there, Christine, that I want to raise, when we're speaking about a poem or a song, we don't say the author. The author of this song would be Simon and Garfunkel. We're talking about the narrator, so you want to be specific there. The narrator is a worker in his factory. Yes, Richard's employee, a poor worker of Richard Cory. Exactly, very good. So he's a worker and he's poor. Miss Danila says, I think it's only child. Miss Danila just typed the first verse for us. Very nice, thank you. And the author wishes he was like Richard Cory. Exactly, he wishes he had everything that Richard Cory has. His employee, and he works with Richard Cory, who is not as rich as Richard Cory. Yes, not only is he not as rich, he seems very poor. Okay, so let's look at some adjectives we could use here. He's an employee, like many of you said. He works in Richard Cory's factory. He seems poor and very bitter about it, right? He's talking about the poverty that he lives in. He curses the life that he's living. If you curse the life you're living, it means that you basically say bad things about it and you feel not so great about it, is what that suggests. And he's also, yeah, so he's poor, he's bitter. He's also envious of Richard Cory. The last three lines, I wish that I could be, I wish that I could be, I wish that I could be Richard Cory. He repeats it, he stresses it. He wishes that he could be this man, Richard Cory, who he sees as being above him, this man who has everything. Okay, let's go on to the second verse. The papers print his picture almost everywhere he goes. Richard Cory at the opera, Richard Cory at a show. And the rumor of his parties and the orgies on his yacht. Oh, he surely must be happy with everything he's got. Okay, so let's continue. Now try to use some new adjectives here. Try to use some adjectives that you know in English to describe how Richard Cory lives. What does this verse tell us about the way that Richard Cory lives, according to this narrator who's bitter and envious of Richard Cory? Now, a few words that I want to talk about here. rumor of his parties and the orgies on his yacht. A yacht, that's how it's pronounced there, yacht. A yacht is a big, big, big boat that really rich people own. So if you own a yacht, it's just essentially a big boat with all sorts of different rooms on it. And people who own yachts often have private parties on their yachts too. So he says, and the orgies on his yacht. Now, an orgy has a very sexual connotation. An orgy is when a bunch of people get together and have sex together, basically. But it also means, you can also use it to say, if you just indulge in something, indulge in a lot of something. So if you meet with a bunch of people and there's tons of drinking and smoking going on, you could call that an orgy. But most often it has a very sexual connotation, okay? He surely must be happy with everything he's got. So let's try to answer this question. How does Richard Cory live? He lived in his yacht. It's likely, well, it doesn't really suggest that he lived in his yacht, but it certainly says that he has parties on his yacht, or suggests that at least. There are rumors of parties on his yacht. Carol says, it seems that Richard Cory is a very famous man. He lives a rich life, says Sridan Stefanovic. Exactly. He belongs opulent stuff. Very good. Okay, very good. A happy-go-lucky guy. Well, we'll come back to that. He is eager to get better. Okay, interesting. Ambitious, says Grace. Interesting. I don't know if we see so much ambition here. It's more speaking about the lifestyle that he lives and how he spends a lot of money and has these big parties on his yacht. His famous dissolute life, says Patricia Andrietta. Right. Dissolute means kind of not morally noble. Maybe Richard is a famous actor, someone who is really famous. He is rich and lives happily. He was the heart of parties and popular personality. He has a fancy life, says Elizabeth. Lived in the first class, traveling all over the world, and has dignity and fame and spread as an important person. Yeah, so you guys get the picture. What I wrote down too was, here's a nice idiom that you can know. He's in the public eye. If someone is in the public eye, what that means is they're very visible in public. Everyone sees them. The papers print his picture, so he's always in the newspaper. You can see him at operas, you can see him at these shows, and you hear about him all the time. So imagine if the public was a person, the public in general. In the public eye means that they're in view of the public. The public can see them. So he's always in the public eye. He lives a lavish lifestyle, I wrote. Now, this is a nice fancy adjective that you can learn. Lavish just means expensive. If something is lavish, if you have a lavish party, for example, it means that you spend a lot of money, you have big parties and blah, 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 blah. It basically involves spending a lot of money. And let's remember, I wanted to write down perspective here just to remind us who's telling the story, okay? So this is according to this narrator of the story, right? This person who works in Richard Cory's factory. The chorus repeats here, but I work in his factory and I curse the life I'm living and I curse my poverty and I wish that I could be, oh, I wish that I could be, oh, I wish that I could be Richard Cory. Let's move on to the last verse of the song, and there's a big surprise here. He freely gave to charity. So again, we're talking about Richard Cory now. He freely gave to charity. He had the common touch, and they were grateful for his patronage and thanked him very much. So my mind was filled with wonder when the evening headlines read, Richard Cory went home last night and put a bullet through his head. So why was the narrator's mind filled with wonder? Let me know in the comment section and tell me what the big shock is in this song. while you're doing that, I want to talk about a few words and phrases here. He had the common touch. The common touch is a saying in English. What it means is it describes someone who is very wealthy and famous, who is basically nice to people who aren't as wealthy and famous as them. So if someone is rich and famous and they communicate well and do nice things for people who are below them, let's say below them, then that person, you could say, has the common touch. He deals with ordinary people. He or she deals with ordinary people in a nice way. They don't think that they're above other people. So he gave to charity, and the charities were grateful for his patronage. So patronage means support, basically, and giving back. And they thanked him very much. So my mind was filled with wonder when the evening headlines read, "Richard Cory went home last night and put a bullet through his head." What's the big surprise here? Yes, Shazia Ali says Richard Cory shot himself. Shot, past tense, not shooted. But you're right, Richard Cory shot himself. Poor worker was very astonished to see that news because he feels depressed. Richard Cory. Surprised, sad song, says Grace. Luxurious life. It's comparison between rich and poverty, grace and curse. The life is always unfair. Well, yeah, let's talk about this. Exactly, Patricia says suicide. So the song ends with this suicide. Throughout the song, we've been hearing about Richard Cory, about how he's this big, important man, about how he has everything a man could want, about how he lives this lavish lifestyle. He has all of these big parties. He has all the money he needs. Everyone loves him. Yet then he goes and he commits suicide. And we hear about this from this factory worker who is living in poverty, who wishes that he was Richard Cory. So there's this shock. This man who is narrating the song, he looks up to Richard Cory and he sees Richard Cory as an ideal almost. He sees Richard Cory as having everything that he wants to have. And then Richard Cory goes and commits suicide. Augustine is asking what the common touch means. Augustine, I explained it about 2 minutes ago, but basically, if you have the common touch, it means that you're a wealthy person, you're famous, and you can relate to ordinary people well. You don't see people who aren't as famous or as rich as you as below you. You treat them well, okay? So yeah, let's talk about this. You guys understood the song well, I think. There's a suicide at the end, and actually, when I was planning this lesson together, when I was planning this lesson last night, I was thinking about an experience in my own life. And when I was younger, I went on a trip. And I was staying at this one resort, and I'll never forget. I remember I was at a Starbucks. I was waiting to get a coffee, and there were lots of people there. And all of a sudden, I kind of heard people whispering around me, and they were talking about this one celebrity who had just entered the coffee shop. And his name was Chester Bennington. He was the lead singer, one of the lead singers of the band Linkin Park. And I didn't really know him too well. I didn't know what he looked like, but I saw and I noticed that everyone was talking about him and looking at him standing in this coffee shop. And there was just this, you could feel this energy in the coffee shop. It was the same kind of thing I imagine this factory worker would feel or other people would feel when Richard Cory would walk around, this electricity almost, this energy. And Chester Bennington, of course, famous rock star, another person who made it as a rock star and was living their dream, perhaps. Life, you would look at a rock star and you would think life is pretty good for rock stars. And the same thing, Chester Bennington in late last year committed suicide too. And it's very sad. And again, it makes us think about perception versus reality, how we perceive other people to be. We look at what they do, we look at what they've accomplished, and we think, oh, they must be happy. Everything must be perfect in their lives. But of course, inside, it's a totally different story often. And again, this distinction between how we present ourselves in public versus how we feel in private. Here in the West, it's very common to, when you see someone and you say, oh, how's it going? You ask, how's it going right away? And even if things aren't going so well in your life, the common thing to do, the polite thing to do, is to smile and to say, oh, everything is great, how are you? And often what happens is people are doing this all day. They're saying that things are great. They're presenting this image of themselves. But in reality, in private, things aren't so great. They're suffering. Maybe they had a fight with their partner. Who knows? Everything could be going wrong. So this song really makes us think about public versus private life and how we present ourselves in public. Huang Vu says maybe he used drugs. Maybe. It's quite possible. After orgy, Mr. Cory got great hungover, so he could not bear it. Maybe it was the hangovers of the orgies. Who knows? It's like he had been on an even playing field. Interesting. He had the common touch, means to be down to earth, says Shridan. Yes, it's very similar. It's that you could say that it means that. Okay. Christine is asking, but do you agree with me that with diligence, you can own what you want? Yeah, but you can also own what you want and not be very happy about it still. A lot of the time, I think this is quite common. I think people imagine that if they had this one thing in their lives that they don't have in the present moment, they would be happy. Maybe it's money, maybe it's a fancy car, maybe it's a nice house. And then if that thing actually happens, if they do get that thing, they still feel this emptiness that they felt before. And that can be even more disturbing. And I think that song nicely illustrates that. Interesting, Patricia. No life is enviable. Just live your proper life. All that glitters is not gold. Yeah, perfect, Shazia. Very, very nice phrase to use there. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you haven't listened to the song yet, listen to the song now. I think you perhaps will be able to appreciate it more. That's the nice thing about analyzing these songs. And I just wanted to say that if you enjoyed this, consider joining Jacob's English Club. Many of my students are watching right now, and we do stuff like this all the time in Jacob's English Club. What I mean is we analyze songs, we analyze poems, we analyze different English YouTube videos, and we really talk a lot about the deeper meaning of these English materials. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, make sure to check out jacobsenglishclub.com. And I hope that you guys have a fantastic Wednesday. That is all that I have to say. I'm going to get the day started here in Canada. It looks like the sunshine is out. And I will be here next Wednesday. Okay? Thank you so much, everyone. Take care, and I will see you later.